Hi, everybody. Welcome, students, faculty, administration, and all of you who have joined us here today for the Cleveland State University Monte Ahuja College of Business very first Best in Biz panel series. I'm Alex Okoye. I'm going to be your host and your moderator today, and I'm also marketing faculty at the school. I want to acknowledge Heather and Chris in the Dean's office and your entire team for producing everything today. Thank you so much to all of you. You've made this world spin and you've made this happen. So thank you so much. And now it is my honor to introduce to you our panelists. First, meet Sally Schriner. Sally, if you want to wave. Sally is founder and president of Schriner Growth Partners, where she consults local companies, quote, to accelerate growth through strategic planning, market research, brand digital marketing, social media, lead generation, and sales strategies. Prior to, Sally was also venture partner at Jumpstart, where she advised over 50 startup entrepreneurs. And before that, she was at American Greetings for over 14 years, with her last role as president of AG Interactive. Sally also sits on various boards and is a champion for Cleveland companies. Welcome, Sally. We're grateful you're here. Next, meet Paul Palmer. Paul, if you want to wave. Paul is founder and managing partner of Kaleidoscope Marketing Solutions, where they, quote, deliver marketing and communication services, including multicultural and targeted marketing, specializing in kids, tweens, and college students. Brand strategy, effective use of advertising and non-traditional media, including social and online, licensing and partnership development, and the business case for diversity and inclusion. Additionally, Paul is both faculty and diversity coach of the MBA program at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. And somehow Paul has managed to lead both at Kelley and with Kaleidoscope for over 10 years now, all at the same time. I don't know how you did it, but great job, Paul. And prior to, Paul was also director of marketing at American Greetings. And before that, he had one of the coolest jobs on the planet. He was brand manager at Hasbro Toys, where he oversaw the Star Wars line. Does not get any cooler than that. Thank you, Paul. We are grateful that you are here. And finally, Jessica Weese. Jessica, if you want to wave. Jessica is Regional Vice President at American Greetings, where over the past 15 years, she has grown her marketing and sales career. Jessica has worked with top retailers, including Meijer and Five Below, which targets teens and tweens, elevating their business while also managing a Salesforce team. For 12 years, Jessica worked exclusively with Walmart, the world's biggest retailer. Jessica first began working on the Walmart account as Senior Category Management Analyst, then Category Manager, National Account Manager, and ultimately Senior Account Executive. She's worked intimately with Walmart buyers, often anticipating their ever-evolving needs, and also spent an entire year living in Bentonville, Arkansas, where Walmart is headquartered. Jessica is an expert at consumer segmentation, turnaround leadership, sales operation, and market analysis. Welcome, Jessica. We're grateful you're here. And if you're in the audience and you're wondering why the American Greetings connection, I also worked for the company for 5 years and have been incredibly fortunate to have worked with and for these three talented people. Not only are they tremendous marketers, they're also outstanding leaders of people. Thank you, Sally and Paul and Jessica, for being with us here today. And now for my first question. Thank you. And now for my first question. And what I will do is I will be, the way that's going to go is I have prepared a series of questions. I'm going to ask the panel in general. Anyone and everyone is welcome to chime in. Do not feel obligated that you have to answer every single question. And then once we are done with these, then we're going to go ahead and take questions from the audience. Okay. So my first question to the panel, 2020 has been a game changer. What is the biggest business shift that you have witnessed?
I guess I'll jump in and go first. We can go around the room. So with my job, working primarily with retailers, the biggest shift has been how and where people are shopping. And, you know, we know the trends were heading towards online, omni-channel, and it was slowly ticking that way. But when COVID hit, everything accelerated and amplified. And it really changed how everybody manage their business, from the retailers to the suppliers. How do you react? How do you manage your supply chain? Your marketing then has to change if they're not in stores. So that was a very dramatic and very fast shift.
I would say one.
Sorry, Paul.
Go ahead, Sally.
I was just going to add that obviously video has been, just one of the biggest trends. Work from home, there's just a huge shift in people, right? I think really recognizing people and their needs as your employees, and how effective teams can be still working together when they can't sit in a room together, how they can still make decisions, move swiftly, make major shifts, as Jessica mentioned, major shifts to solve the new consumer problems and new customer problems. But I've been working from home for 5 years, and I had a very hard time getting any of my clients on video until March 15th. After March 15th, I had to fly to Dallas to meet a client because they wouldn't get on video. And after March 15th, they asked me, can we please be, seeing you on video now? So I think it's just been a major shift that I think, and I know, it probably won't change, that people will look at efficiencies and how they can participate in more things without travel.
I think that's a great stepping point to Sally, too. One of the things I've seen is just this increased focus on marketing and consumer connections. How do we stay truly connected to people and to be able to market to them and communicate with them? We've taken for granted, if you will, that we're going to go to the grocery store and see our favorite checkout person, or talk to the individual that's manning the meat counter or the deli counter, or talk to the young lady who's working in produce. And that's going to be part of our selling, that personal selling that's going to take place. Well, clearly in a pandemic, when we're being discouraged from having true physical contact, how do we continue to stay connected to our consumers? Because if we don't, someone else is going to find a vehicle or a method or a platform to do such. So we have to stay engaged with consumers during the pandemic, probably even more so than we normally would, because we don't have those easy gateways or platforms to do so. So we have to, because there's increased clutter and competition as well. So once we as we all know, once you're home, the amount of stimulus you get in the house and the clutter can sometimes be overwhelming. So we have to figure out a way to stay connected and have messages that truly connect with our consumers.
Yeah,
I want to add, sorry, I was going to just add one more thing, which is that I think that there's also companies that are looking to make sure they're connected with their employees too.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that human side of being really, empathy is something that's come out in many ways. I think you see even really big companies, Pepsi. One of my good friends works there, and that's been a real focus of them, of now all of a sudden we understand our employees and their needs more than ever, and their physical, mental, financial needs all combined, not just their needs to get their job done. And I think that's a major shift as well. And I think you're seeing that on small companies all the way up to Fortune 500 companies as well.
Yeah. When you were talking, Paul, about those connections with people, and Sally too, the connections with people within the company, I think both within the company and marketing to consumers, I think through COVID, and then you add in the political environment and everything that's happening, there's such a heightened sensitivity that I feel like there's no room for inauthenticity. Sorry, could not get that out. You have to be genuine and real and very, very in tune with your audience, because if you are off just a little bit, they'll chew you up. And that goes for messaging within companies and messaging to customers.
Thank you, everyone. This kind of segues into both my next two questions, but I'll ask them one at a time. From your observation, from whether it's local, national, or global, which companies do you think have truly evolved to address the demands of this year? And as Jessica has alluded to, it hasn't just been COVID, right? It's, the tensions with the election. It's also all the focus about racial equality, about all the social issues that are happening. This has just been a Vesuvian year, if you will, of things. So which companies do you feel have truly evolved to address these demands and did so swiftly?
I think Disney is an amazing example of a huge company that has been able to really shift their model. Looking at how and listen to their customers too. Back to Jessica's point of looking and saying my customers aren't going to go into theaters. So I need to pull releases onto Disney Plus as an example. Or the theme parks. I think they responded really quickly early on that you could get a digital tour of one of the theme parks. So I think they had already started really embracing their digital next steps. So I think they've continued to do that in just remarkable ways that set them off as a leader in omnichannel, really everything as a brand.
And it's actually funny, Sally, that you mentioned that, because I'll actually go somewhat tangential, but a little bit different direction. My friends in the toy industry at Hasbro and Lego, I have to give a really big shout out to. They realized early on that family fun and family activities for the home were going to be key. So they're able to shift the focus to this, unstructured games and play, which I think has been critical to their success this year. And it's very interesting. They've leveraged this advertising message that's around nostalgia, fun, a focus on the family, and this reintroduction of family game night, because the family game night concept, it's funny. Every time I see the advertising, I start laughing because I was involved a bit in that when I was at the company. And it's a concept that works really well in person. It works really well virtually, and it also works well in a hybrid modality. So across multiple platforms, it works well. And you think about Lego and kind of building new adventures, is something that really works well. So they've been able to maximize the supply chain, get a continuous flow of product to the shelf and online. And here's the thing that most people don't realize: about 70 to 75% of toy sales traditionally happen in the fourth quarter because of Hanukkah and Christmas. So think about the need to pull forward all your supply chain and all your inventory, because this started in March and April, to be able to maximize that opportunity, but also to meet a pent-up demand that consumers had for activities. So I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my heritage, if you will.
Great.
So I have actually two examples. One, I think probably being a bit obvious, with Kimberly-Clark and Cottonelle. I mean, whoever would have thought we would in our lifetime be in a situation where you cannot buy toilet paper? So to have those rapid changes in their supply chain to meet that demand, but then at the same time, using that as an opportunity to create messaging to their customers with their hashtag share a square campaign, and giving it and kind of, I think, calming people down a little bit. But the one that really stuck with me, I think was more to do with speed, was, I think it was second or third week of March, Ford launched an ad that, and I remember saying this on TV, and it was talking about how we've been here for so long. We manufactured tanks and stuff during World War II. We're going to get through this, but then also offering their relief assistance across the country, which is something they only normally offer in very small areas, such as places that are hit by hurricanes. So for them to, one, make that decision, a very large financial decision, develop an ad and a campaign within weeks, I thought was amazing, because American automakers are not usually known for being nimble and agile.
Those are excellent examples. Thank you. And my next question kind of piggybacks off of something, Sally, you'd mentioned earlier about how companies have really needed to get to know their employees. how empathy is super huge right now, and how whether it's mental, physical, financial, emotional, the companies that are not supporting their staff right now are really going to lose out. And the companies that are supporting their staff and addressing those needs are really winning, and they're going to win for the long haul. So my question is, what do you think? Because you've all been, I know Jessica, you're still a senior executive at a big company, but you've all led huge teams at big companies before you started your own organizations. Because you've been such effective managers, especially with people before these types of crises, what do you think this has to look like from inside the organization with all the stakeholders? So whether it's the employees, the management, the C-suite, to the contractors, the community, what are some of the things that would have had to happen top down for organizations to actually be effective during this time to their employees, i.e., which translates obviously to the consumers?
I think communication, is I always say, right, you have to be clear and consistent about your communication. And so whatever that is, if it's a change in strategy or if that is customer needs, really understanding that and making sure everybody is aligned. Everybody knows what their job is to get done in that alignment, and being really clear in the communication of having that. I think there had been companies that I've worked with who were having weekly communications with all of their employees just to make sure that there was that touch point and that they knew what what they were working on next. Some of that's changed where it's not quite as often anymore, but still communication, I would say, number one.
And to piggyback what Sally said, I really think there's also a fundamental focus that's got to happen on the we and not the thee. So sometimes it's always the organization, the people, the consumers. It's more of a we today. We need to be focused, and management has to acknowledge we need to make sure that our employees and the we are focused on being healthy. So when we think about holistic health, our health, mental health, the well-being of our employees and our consumers and our community, that has to come to the front, because in a pandemic, people are like, hey, I have to be healthy. I need to take care of myself, my family. If not, I'm going to collapse. So if the organization doesn't recognize the value of the we and everyone in the we, I think we have some clear issues that are going to continue to snowball. And when people see an opportunity to leave the organization, they will, because they don't feel value. And the same thing with consumers. If they don't feel like we care and we value them, they're going to find someone that does.
Great.
Yeah, 1000% agree with that, Paul. And I think obviously the communication from the top down about what the new priorities are, how things are shifting, the expectations are extremely important. But to have open, honest, and frequent communication from the bottom up so that everybody is being heard is extremely important, because there are people that, whatever their situation may be, they may be mentally, emotionally fragile at any given time. And they need to be heard about this is what I need. And yeah, in order to keep top talent and keep your organization running, you need to hear them and you need to be able to react to whatever their requests and needs are.
And it can be a little, Jessica, I have a former student and mentee who is a district store manager for Aldi. And to highlight the point you bring up, one of the first things that Aldi did during the pandemic is they stopped a significant amount of their sales of hand sanitizer, not because they wanted to take it away from the marketplace, but the interesting piece is their employees said, hey, we're scared. I mean, if we don't know much about this virus in March and April, it sounds like, remember at the very beginning, it was about touching, right? There was a whole concept that we thought the majority spread was via touch. So they wanted to pull back cleaning supplies and sanitizer from the marketplace, not to take it from consumers, but so their own employees at the store level would not be afraid and would feel like, hey, your first priority is to protect us, so then we can do what we need to do to move the business forward at the point of sale, which I thought was something small, but it highlighted within the organization that they valued that store level employee who may, in the overall scheme of things, be making $10, $12, $14 an hour, but that person was perceived as just as important as a person making $140 an hour.
And Paul, actually, as somebody who is an Aldi shopper, I saw that in the stores that the regular, wipes and sanitizers weren't available, but they were very much the products that the employees were consistently using either on themselves or to clean the shopping carts, but they were available for them. And I thought, wow, look at that priority, right? That's a completely different shift of employees first, and your consumers are happy. Thank you for your insight. So we've talked a little bit about how the consumer expectations have shifted. Obviously, technology. Paul, you referred to home games and home activities and staying at home and doing more things that way. But how have the expectations of consumers changed of the companies that they shop from? What are they seeking and demanding from companies, whether it's in the form of products or services or even the delivery, the order process, in order to get through this crisis, and probably things that they're going to expect moving forward after the crisis is over?
For me, I think one of the things that's important is new content. I think is paramount. I mean, having new content, and I was jokingly talking to one of the ladies before we started the call that it's very interesting to me that we talk about what's down the pipeline was like this year, 18 months, 24 months. Now what's down the pipeline is what do we have that's 3 months out that I can move to this month? What do I have that was supposed to launch in 6 weeks that we can get on the floor today or this week? So I think it's this, we need to make sure there's new, fresh content that's available for our consumer audience. Sally made a great reference to what Disney did. Just think about how they were able to bring Hamilton and Mulan to the marketplace when a lot of their competitors were like, well, we're going to hold off till after the pandemic. I'm like, you're going to hold a movie 18 months when consumers are clamoring and demanding content now? There has to be a way for us to creatively come up with a financial model that'll allow us to leverage this content and bring it to market sooner.
Yeah, I think, one of the other pieces is I see there's sort of this dynamic where there's a little bit of forgiveness, right? Where people are really forgiving of whatever, sort of empathy that comes from the consumer too, where, yeah, people understand that the stock, toilet paper was out and that the company's doing what they can, Target's doing what they can to restock. But I do think there's also the expectations have been raised too of I need to have options to be able to have something curbside. I need to have an option to be able to pick it up. I think, I use Target as a great example because I think they, again, things were they already had an app that allowed you to drive up and buy, not produce and perishables, but you could buy your paper goods, really drive up. And not that many people were using it, right? They had 4 spaces that you pull up and maybe somebody's in a space. They had a couple employees who would run out when somebody was there. The demand of, again, when it was safe again to come into the store, they still offered that because, they realize there's a portion of people who don't want to go enter back into the store. They then added perishables to that as well. So I think, being able to see that there's going to be multiple changes and demands and be able to flex to that, I think companies have been really smart to respond to customer demands that way. Like I think restaurants, even small restaurants, have been amazing in being able to be creative about ways they can offer a virtual wine dinner. Come up, pick this up and take it home, and you can have a virtual wine dinner with us. Experiences, these sort of experience beyond what the experience was before. So I think there's sort of a interesting creativity that consumers are challenging companies to come up with, whether it's a small company or a big company.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that might come out of this too, and is not just through COVID, but through the election, is consumers wanting to know what companies stand for.
Mhm.
Like, really, who are you and what do you stand for? How do you treat people, especially through this very difficult time. How did you treat your employees? How did you treat your customers? Because I think that can have very lasting ramifications. So I think people are, you know, obviously there's some times where through this period where you're buying things places you normally wouldn't because you have to. But as things start to return to normal, people are going to be voting with their dollars.
Mhm. Yep, that's absolutely true. And I will just add on a little bit to that. I've especially noticed this, and I know, Paul, you're also a professor. So uh, Generation Z and millennials, they really need to know where the company stands for, because I always say, besides technology and gear, because technology and gear just seem to be very, very passionate categories for the younger generation. But beyond that, they really need to value what your values are, or they're just not going to shop with you. And I'm seeing that as an increase. So yeah, Jessica, 100%.
And they won't want to work for you either. I mean, I think that's, from an employer standpoint, that authenticity of, what are you as an employer? How are you going to attract and retain talent? Especially now, there's a lot of geographic bounds that are out, right? Where you can get talent from different places because some of the requirements to work in this location are gone. So yeah, I think it's going to be really important for companies to think about it internally and externally.
And I think to your point, it's no longer social causes and corporate advertising are front line. They used to be just to throw in like, hey, if we have some residual dollars available, let's sponsor this, let's sponsor that. Well, someone I think likes this charity or this activity. I think now it's a principal part of your organization, like social causes, corporate advertising. Consumers really want to know what your supporters stand for, and the whole don't ask, don't tell mindset is just no longer an option. I mean, I know some things are controversial, BLM, children's charities, Chick-fil-A, Goya Foods. I mean, I know these are polarizing, but you know what? You gotta, to Sally's point, be authentic. This is what we stand for. This is who we support. And I think that proactive critical thinking around embracing this polarity, it might negatively affect you, but I think bigger picture, it's making a clear, authentic statement on who you are and what you represent, what's important to you and those in the organization.
Absolutely. And both consumers and potential employees, they either have to connect with that or they're moving on, for sure. So I'm going to ask you a question because, part of marketing that I think sometimes frustrates people is all the jargon that's always thrown in, right? And for some reason within business, the whole avenue of business, marketing seems to come up with the most amount of jargon, and it's very trend based. What was a trendy expression in marketing today is no longer a trendy marketing expression tomorrow. But all of us have been doing this for 20 years at least. And in the past, marketers, whether it's in business school or whatever company we grew up in the ranks with, always talked about the customer journey. And the word that I have heard the most in all the trade journals this year has been about the customer experience. And what does that really mean? And how can companies be better at it?
So, the customer journey has typically always been like the start to finish, and the finish point is a buying, right? And the experience really is more of, the full experience of your product or service throughout the lifetime of using them, right? It doesn't end at the buying point. And so thinking about how a customer is evaluating, but also how they're using and how they, you're really embracing them as a brand advocate, hopefully at some point too. I think there's just a broader thinking of, it's not just get them to purchase, it's create a connection.
Yeah. And I think, there's been such a huge increase in terms of the data we have available and what we can monitor and what we can see that people are doing, especially now that so much purchasing is now happening online, and they can, they're measuring every click that you make and how long you look at something, and, whether you're taking something out of your cart. So there's very accurate measurements about what you're doing and predicting what you might do. But now I'm seeing this shift, and I think the term they're using now is called humanizing, the humanization portion of it, and not just measuring what you're doing, but actually asking people, how do you feel about this? Which I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in the numbers and the measurement and the analytics, but to be able to add into like, well, how do you feel about it? I think it is, it's going to be very interesting to see how those two merge.
When I think of the experience piece, I think of what Sally mentioned, which is the advocacy. I mean, ultimately, to that point, it used to be we sell you a product and we literally kind of wash our hands with the situation until you need to repurchase. And now it's how do we keep consumers engaged to the degree that they're part of the solution, they're part of the spread or growth of our product. They have what they need to take our product and engage with their neighbors, their family, their friends, and they're the big voice of support for us out in the marketplace. And how does our product, good, or service help them truly live their life? I mean, it's kind of when I think about, some of the gaming industry, it's not that you just buy the Game Boy or you buy your, whatever device, it's who are you playing with? So what's happening when you're playing with it? What are some of the other products that are part of this environment, this community of gamers that you're with? And how do we set you up to be successful and also advocate for the benefits of our product? So it's something that it doesn't just end, to Sally's point, at the cash register. We're going into the home, into their life to figure out how do we add value? How do we add value to their overall experience?
Yeah, I think you're right, Paul. It's the impact, right? It's your product should make an impact on somebody's life, whatever that is, or service. And it's that full impact of what did you do to make somebody's, life different. And it may be just some little tiny product, but it is an impact versus a, purchase.
So these next two questions, I'm going to combine them because they're pretty close and you can answer them in whichever way you're most comfortable with. But the two questions are, what marketing related changes are here to stay, i.e. what's become an irreversible best practice? And then even once there's a lot of different vaccines that are getting very, very close to approval, but even once they get approved, what do you think we're going to see more of in 2021? Like if you had a crystal ball right now, what are you foreshadowing to be happening in 2021 directionally within the scope of marketing and business and consumers and companies?
It's interesting for me. I think there's a demand for more customized products, more one-offs. I mean, when you think about 2020 now, it's, I'm going to continue to want what I want. If I can't go out into the world, I want the world to come to me. Mm-hmm. And so I've become hooked. And so my kids who are 16 and 14, they have this mindset now of why can't I have what I want when I want it? Because they have an Amazon Prime mindset, as I call it. And so their mindset as 16 and 14-year-olds is, I literally go online, I have the credit card for mom and dad, I know what I want, and 2 days later it gets delivered. So I think in 2021, they're going to expect, and they're growing consumers, right? They're the ones we want because they've got a potentially 60, 70-year lifespan of spending. They're going to want what they want. They want it customized. They want it to fit their need. They want it fast, right? And they want it delivered right to their doorstep. And so even things like Office Max, my son needed some print cartridges for the printer. He ordered from our local Office Max in Westlake, and they delivered it right to our door within like 4 hours. And he was kind of like, yeah, this is the way it should be. And I'm like, wait a minute, buddy. And so there's that expectation. I think that as we look forward to 2021, I see a demand for more customized products, more immediacy, and more one-offs. I want what I want, and I want it now.
I think convenience, right? Like there is a demand for convenience. I think everybody's life slowed down a lot, and so hopefully the push on convenience or demand of what I want what I want now. I think there will be some pieces of the slowing down that people will go, well, do I really want to jump back into that? But I think there'll be a lot of pieces of convenience that people will say, I will pay anybody $1.99 to shop for me at Heinen's. And then I go drive up and put it in my trunk. Like that for me, mom of two, 8-year-old and 7-year-old, we're in the house all day. Like, I am happy to go and get my groceries, and I will continue to be happy to, even we figured out how they can pick out the right bananas, like all good. You know, my first job out of college was in the television world, right? In satellite television. And so I'm fascinated by everything that's happened with the demand and delivery of media. And so, you know, DirecTV, or now, you know, AT&T now, Disney, Netflix, the original programming, just the consumption of such a variety of non-network promotion, which really, what, you know, my point in that too is that the advertising shift has really happened. And I think that's going to, you know, continue. I worked with a company last year. We talked about pre-roll. You know, we could advertise a pre-roll for demand. And they're like, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? I don't understand. Right. Big old company, but that's where people are. And so, you know, I think that and social, looking at ways that, like, that's not going to change. People are going to continue to look at how they're consuming their news and their information. And as Paul had said, like, their influencers from their friends and their family, like, they're going to continue to look at their digital channels for how they're going to consume more. I think it's just going to continue. And advertising, as a result, the eyeballs are there. And it can, you know, even to Jessica's point, like, you can get really targeted on who you're looking for when, because of that. And so the efficiency of advertising should continue to even get better. The measure, you know, I 5 years ago, actually probably 10 years ago, super frustrated that agencies would say, do this advertisement and this is what should happen. And then after that, you'd say, why didn't that happen? I'm like, I don't know. Well, that doesn't stand up anymore. And so that ability to you know, plan, measure, and be really efficient with your dollars, and be targeted with that, I think will continue.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, when you're talking about the dollar spend, the something that's changed through this and starting to amplify and accelerate is retailers that are now using advertising as an income base. And so if you think about it, like, you're selling into Walmart and you have to pay to access their data and what they know from walmart.com. You now have to pay them to advertise on walmart.com to drive more sales for them. Mm-hmm. And how everything kind of becomes like, not really siloed, but it's so contained. And I'm not sure if that, how long that's going to last, or if it, you know, if it's going to continue to grow, or if there's going to be, I guess, some sort of tipping point. But it's something that I find very fascinating, because I think Amazon they're making billions off of advertising on their own site to get people to buy more stuff on their own site. It used to be advertising was on different sites to drive them to Amazon or what have you, or to buy certain items, drive the traffic to that site. It's like they're already there. And now you're paying them to sell more stuff. You know, it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
I think from the non-consumer side, just even, you know, I think with some of my clients too, we've just seen this huge realization that travel, I mentioned it at the very beginning, but just the travel, I think we're going to see some differences. I think, you know, trade shows and those sorts of things will rebound, but I think you'll see a change of behavior that'll happen of how sales happen. You know, I work with a couple companies who only did events to drive their leads. And in March, they, you know, and had resisted doing any sort of online webinar or anything else to connect with a customer differently, or a lead differently. And in March, you know, it all of a sudden it was like, oh no, what do I do? Some were able to do and make that pivot. I had one client who had like 70 people showed up at their first webinar. They never had 70 people in an event. And I'm like, okay, like this is it, right? This is it. So I think there'll be some pieces that companies from a B2B perspective too will look at it and say, I need to sell differently. people are searching more on Google to find solutions. I need to be aware of that. I need to, knocking on the door may not be what I'm going to be able to do anymore. The relationship building is going to look different. So I think it's all, I think there will be, back to Paul's point, there will still be this connection that people want though. So you have to think about what the way is to authentically communicate and connect with people, but still, I think it'll be a little different.
With that point, one of the areas I'm really interested in, I'm kind of focusing some of my kind of study on, if you will, is what's going to happen in sports, specifically professional sports and even at the college level, because we miss the fact that this is a $40 billion industry when you think about professional sports. And while the NBA and the National Hockey League were able to execute their seasons in a confined bubble, if you will, what does that long-term financial model look like? Because if there's a chance that we may have a second season with no fans in those venues, because they're indoor venues, people sitting literally on top of each other, what's that look like? If you have no fans, what's the financial model look like? And how do we continue to give the fan experience? Because it used to be you could go, even if you didn't go to the game, you would go and tailgate. So you have all this revenue that's generated both at the venue, but also in the restaurants, the bars, the parking facilities, all around these structures. What's that model look like as we go forward? Not just from an advertising standpoint, but truly from a consumer and human engagement and experience standpoint. That's going to be something I think we have to kind of look at and work through, because it has cascading implications on, the hotel business, the restaurant business, dollars that communities receive. So that's going to be something I'm really focused on, because I don't think we have a clear understanding yet of what's going to happen.
And Paul, just to add to what you're saying, I follow, as a former musician myself, I follow a lot of musicians, and it's the exact same thing in the music industry, because I think we all know that musicians, especially today in streaming, they don't make their money in streaming. They don't make their money with us listening to them. They make their money on touring and merchandising and those events, and go meet the guitarist and that kind of stuff. And the musicians it's the same thing. The impact's been phenomenally awful of this year. So the music industry and those things that we want to see live, which is sports and music, and entertainment in general, that, has been a tremendous tipping point. So you're right. What's going to happen to all those live entertainment, platforms that we are used to experiencing? So
Add theater to that too. I mean,
yes.
I think,
Yeah.
I think there have been some nice creative ways that, you can stream, I mean, you mentioned Hamilton before, but even, streaming, there've been a few artists we've watched from home, and we watch them when they're streaming, at this great place in Nashville. They sell $10 ticket and you can, get a great concert at home, but it's not like my husband and I are like, we want to feel the music like around us. And that's what we really miss. And I think that same thing, that full experience with sports and with theater and with music, it'll return, it'll come back. It just is, how do you go through next year? And will there be innovations to kind of sustain while we're getting back to returning to our normal?
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see. And just to anchor everyone in time, it is 12:15. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask one more question. It's layered in 3 different topics, but it's pretty much the same question to all of you. And then once you answer that, we will go ahead and open up the questions to the audience. I know I've already got a 2-part question from one of the audience members. And yes, Jessica, you've got a hard stop. I know you've got your next call, so I know that you may need to bump out a couple minutes early. So thank you in advance for being here if I don't have a chance to say thank you after the fact. So this question is, because we have multiple audiences right now that are watching this webinar, and it's also being live streamed on YouTube, and it's going to be recorded so other people will get to see it. This next question is the exact same question, but it's targeting the different audiences, which is, what advice, knowing everything that you know and all your absolutely incredible experiences, what advice after everything that's been 2020 would you give to business students, both undergrad and graduate, younger startup firms, as well as more established organizations? So you can pick one, pick all 3. whatever is your preference. But I would love to hear from you. Here's your opportunity to really mentor people, and you're all phenomenal mentors. So what kind of mentoring advice would you give right now?
You know, about the startup piece, or even I think this probably apply to people that are early in their career too. There was a quote that's been popping up in my mind for the past week or so, and I believe it was from Warren Buffett, that says, "Be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful."
Mm.
So right now, we're in an environment where so many people are fearful, which is very scary, but that opens so many opportunities. Like, who is going to be risky enough to take advantage of this opportunity as people are trying to pull back and be more conservative, are afraid of making mistakes? That just opens a window for so many opportunities. And it's time to be greedy, to take your share, get your piece of the pie.
Great. Thank you, Jessica.
If I was going to say give advice, that's, one of the things I coach mentees on, and even my students, is getting very clear with some of the basics on what's your value proposition. Like, how do you add value? How are you going to make someone's, I always call it, how are you going to make someone's life better? Because even as we talk about the interview process, and it could be going to ask for funding if you're a venture capitalist, being very clear with what is your value proposition? Like, what makes you special? What is this, the space or place that you're looking to own that's going to distinguish you relative to other options that consumers have? And so getting clear with that, because there are a lot of times in interviews, and we've all the people in this panel, we've done extensive interviews with, and we have had to pitch new business. And there are times I've sat in presentations for 15 or 20 minutes and I go, I don't know what distinguishes this person from someone else. I don't know what makes them special. I don't see the value. I don't see what makes you someone that I should invest in. So I think getting clear with some of the very basics is extremely important as we move forward in 2021 and beyond.
So yeah, I agree, and I'd say that from value propositions, everything, right? It's everything from the beginning of what you are as a company, it's a startup, even an employee too. So I agree with you, Paul. I think I for the student side, my advice doesn't change, which is find really great people. COVID hasn't changed it. It probably has made it even more important. But find really great people to work for, really great people to work with, who, really just give you opportunities. Will, especially as you're starting out, whether that's out of undergrad or graduate, you got to find the right person to work for who's going to support you and give you the opportunities to learn and grow in the organization and take those chances on you. I've worked with a lot of startups, so I can say that right now it's tight, and it's going to continue to be tight with investors looking at who they want to invest in. So it gets back to that value proposition. What are you going to do better than anybody else? And is it really a problem? So I worked at a startup, and I learned very quickly the difference between, something that was nice to have and something that was a burning need. And so find that burning need that you're going to solve and bootstrap it as much as you can until you get to a point that you're solving a problem in the market, so you have value to offer to investors. At that point, it'll be better for you and it'll be better for the investor too. And then established organizations is, I think we've seen, like, don't get comfortable. Like, you have to always be in touch with your customer. You, again, have to be in touch with the market, listen to what it is that you're, that experience, what's the impact you're having, and make sure you're not getting comfortable that that's what it is today, because it could change.
I would say that advice also applies to students that are venturing out into their career. As you're pursuing your career path, don't get too comfortable, because when you feel comfortable and you feel like, I got this, I know everything I'm doing, are you really learning, or are you growing? And that's where you really get the biggest learnings of your career and really push yourself, is when you're always working in that space of feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah, the status quo, I don't think that works anymore. I mean, just doing enough Just being average is just not a recipe for longevity or for success. I think the expectation is I had a student once that said, well, how do I stand out? And I said, what are you doing? It's like, well, I do this, that, and I interview, I prep the night before. I'm like, well, what about the student who's tracking the person who they're going to interview with social media? What have you done to invest in the organization and find out what the organization is really about? Have you called our alumni? I mean, good grief. I mean, I'm fortunate to work at Indiana University. We have a large alumni base. Have you called any alums? No. Well, I said, I know for a fact we've got 140 alums at that company. And they look at you blank face. I'm like, so you're just doing the status quo. You expect to show up and have this opportunity to land in your lap. What about the other 10 students who've already spoken to me a couple of weeks ago about the company and have already been directed to a couple of alumni and have already engaged those alumni? Do you think they're ahead of you or not? Like, well, I guess. I'm like, okay. So I think the expectation is that we're going to continue to push the bar higher. So just doing what's established is not going to be successful long term.
Absolutely. All great advice. I had a professor at University of Rochester, the Simon Business School, and he was an engineer from Kodak. He was like a no nonsense guy. And he just summed it up perfectly. You know, you got to rise above the clutter of your competition. That's marketing 101. Rise above the clutter of your competition. And then the first rule of business is that markets never stand still. Markets are always changing. Business is always moving forward. There's always somebody building a better mousetrap, so to speak. So yes, I'm so grateful that all three of you have so eloquently put it. Don't get comfortable and rise above the clutter. Because there's no more such thing as a cushy job. There's no more such thing as a cushy anything, right? Every industry is disrupted and we're living in a very different time. So there's no guarantees. So thank you all for answering my questions. I'm so grateful. And we have a few minutes. So I am inviting anybody who is a guest right now to go ahead and you can just use the chat function for a question. We have a question from Joe, and this goes back to the conversation we had about Aldi and hand sanitizer. That's when he typed it in. And he said his first question is at what point does, quote, price increases during shortages become price gouging? That's a very fair question.
I wish there was a formula for that. That would be really helpful.
Yep.
I think you saw some response to that, right? Where there certainly on marketplaces, Amazon and Etsy and eBay and other places where there was some crackdown on that. I personally don't know how they decide this is the formula to say this is where it is. But again, I think, they're individuals are the bad players mostly. If a brand does it or even a retailer does it, you hear the backlash from it. So it is not going to be a short-term, a short-term gain is definitely a long-term loss.
Yep.
Today, you're just spotlighted in terms of when you do something that's unethical. I think there's such a bright light that can be cast on you, and what we see, it's often difficult to recover from that, that light, especially when it involves something that all of us might agree is unethical and does long-term damage, not just even to the company and the brand, but even how people see us as business leaders and retail partners.
Right. And something that I think we've all noticed is that groceries have gone up in price tremendously over the past year, probably 20%. And something, and this wasn't in my original list of questions, but something that I feel has really happened and doing more research into this is that this crisis has really blown the lid off of broken supply chains. There's been a lot of antiquated supply chains where they don't have the right technology. They're not centralized. They're not organized, where they can't handle capacity even if they're running at 3 shifts. And so do you have any comments about that, even if as long as like something either seen or experienced about supply chain? Because I always say a proper crisis blows the lid out of dysfunction, right? And so, the economic crisis of 2001, it was all of those Enron, WorldCom companies that we saw, oh my goodness, they're doing all this illicit financial activity. This crisis has really blown the lid off of inefficient supply chain and operations. Any commentary about that? Any insight around that?
Well, one of the things I think we all have to remember too is that 70% of the goods in the United States are shipped via tractor trailer. So if you think about the pandemic and the discouragement that we have about travel, right? I mean, they've been actually cracking down on travel. There was the issue in Ohio with Governor DeWine had to make sure that the truck stops would stay open, right? Because the truckers couldn't even get gas or get food or have a safe place to stay. So I think to your point, Alex, we've got some at a base level, some logistical challenges that don't make it, very easy for even the basic tractor trailer operator. And remember, a lot of those operators are individual.
Yeah.
They're one-offs, right? Who are running their own business with their tractor trailer. And if you're telling me there's some hurdles to travel, I can't get gas, I can't get food, I can't have a safe place to stay. That's a problem when 70% of the goods in this country are tractor trailer or driven across the country.
And there was already a shortage of drivers, right? It is, I think I agree that it has highlighted some problems, but it also, the prediction of the, N95 masks selling out, when you put a pallet of them in Costco, a person I've worked with, they put a pallet in Costco of these masks and they were gone in an hour. They put them online and they're gone in 20 minutes. Like, you cannot predict a supply chain, having a right supply chain to be able to replenish, especially even from China, right? When it's not something that you're even manufacturing within the country. So there certainly are multiple points along, predicting what those goods are, how they move across oceans and then across countries. And then even just the labor that's required to get them into warehouses, stores, and into your bags. I think it's I don't think that we're going to find all the solutions, but hopefully, continuous innovation. It's highlighted areas where there needs to be some investment in continuous innovation.
And I think, if you really think about it, a lot of supply chain is really focused on maximum efficiency and as lean as possible, and squeaking out every penny and every cost. But I think in a lot of places, and it's not just business manufacturing, I think even in hospitals too, they got to a point, it's like we're at max efficiency, but we have zero agility. And how do you now going forward balance those two?
Well, Jessica, I think you've worked in, I think we all have, with Walmart extensively. And I can remember at P&G 22 years ago, I can remember going to the back of the Walmart, and it's huge. The back side of the Walmart was as big as the Walmart floor, right? And now,
people would be shocked if they've never seen the back of a Walmart.
Right. Now you walk in the back and it's so much smaller now, right? I mean, they've reduced their warehouse on-site capacity by 75%. It's why they bring the big trailers in during the holiday season, right? They reduce the footprint that they need on site. So I think that highlights your point, Jessica, that we've just really, we've squeezed every little bit of efficiency and depth out of the supply chain that when we need it, it's not there. It's difficult to get that emergency supply to meet the needs of the marketplace.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Heather and Chris and the team at the Dean's Office. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I look forward to hosting another event next spring. Till then, everybody have a very happy and safe Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much. So great to see all of you.
See you. Bye.